So I uploaded a tutorial on how to draw white fur on white paper, and in that tutorial I drew a cat. So if you'd like to check out that video, I have an iCard on the screen right now, and I also have many other coloured fur tutorials that are up on my channel, so check out the description below for the links to those videos. But without further ado, let's jump right into this tutorial. To start with, let's run through those pencils. So I am using the Faber polychromos pencils and also the white luminance pencil. So the pencil I am using are the cold grey 1, cold grey 2, silver, warm grey 1 and the warm grey 2. Plus, as I said, I'm using the white pencil from the Canon luminance set because it is so good and amazing for those highlights. So I'm starting with the warm grey 2, and the reason why I'm starting with this pencil is just to lightly sketch out the main fur details in the white fur. So when I do this, I just use a very light hand and I look at the reference photo to study the type and texture of the fur, the length of the fur, direction of the fur and fur growth. This fur had a slight wave to it, so using the warm grey 2, I'm just carefully sketching in and mapping out all the waves so that it's easier for me just to fill in the surrounding fur and then just build up on any dark values as well. So for example, the shadows in the fur. I'm not really worrying too much at this stage about any specific details. I just want to make sure that I know exactly where all the sections of fur are placed so that I can build up the tone in the fur, and also I'm just making sure to leave some areas free of pencil so that the white highlights can show through. It's also really important that when you map out the sketch of the fur, you do this really lightly, so just add in the basic lines and just keep your pencils really light, so almost like a sketch rather than with a lot of detail or heavy shading or pencil pressure. So we are drawing white fur, so everything needs to be really light, otherwise it will start looking like grey fur. So I've purposely only really used really light grey tones so that it adds the shadows in, but we do it in a way where the fur is still going to look white. So I definitely think that one of the biggest problems when drawing white fur is definitely getting in the wrong values and just picking the wrong colours. So it's so easy to go in too dark and then create this really muddied looking fur, or picking the wrong colours and just ending up with different coloured fur as well. So you definitely need to get that balance in tone so that you can really preserve those white highlights and details, but also have the shading you need to add depth, shadows, tone, dimension to the fur. So with white fur, what you want to start off by doing is just keep it light. So all of the colours you use should be really light, really soft colours, and all of your shading should be light. So your techniques like your pencil pressure should be kept light, except when you're using the white pencil and you want to apply a really hard pressure to create those bright highlights and just lighten up the white fur. So a common misconception about white fur is that white fur is just white, and that it's the only colour in white fur, so you just need to leave an area white because it's white fur, and that is definitely something that is not true, and I'll explain why. So if you look at white fur in any reference photo, the first thing you are definitely going to see is a lot of grey tones. So grey tones are so common in white fur because they are the shadowed parts of the fur. So whether it's really light greys or darker greys, you will see grey in white fur. You might see some cooler grey tones, so cooler grey tones, just greys that have hints of blue undertones and hues in them, or you might even see some warmer grey tones, and warm grey tones have that sort of yellow and brown hues in them, and sometimes you will actually see both. So I'm using both for this tutorial because I can see both in the fur that I'm drawing. It's also not uncommon to see blue, green and sometimes purple in white fur. This can be down to the animal's genetics, light source or even the sun, so it really depends what animal you are drawing, but I guarantee you will see a lot more hues in white fur than you think. So if we look back at the drawing, there's a lot of greys, right? So I know it looks quite dark now and maybe even looks like I'm drawing grey fur, but I am being very careful and precise with my techniques, and I'm just building up the fur gradually and softly to create a seamless transition throughout the entire section of fur. Also, I am drawing white fur on white paper, so it's really important that if you are also drawing white fur on white paper, you draw that fur that is going to stand out. So you can't just leave areas white because the paper is white. So what you need to do is add shading and shadows into the white fur to make it stand out against the white paper. Just make sure that you are leaving plenty of areas lighter and free of pencil. So in the shadowed areas, I'm creating pencil strokes just to mimic the fur, but I am creating those fur strokes close together and just more condensed, and then creating that sparser fur in the areas that are lighter. So I can't stress how important it is to leave room for those highlights. Preserving highlights is key for white fur. It is so easy to get carried away with drawing fur that you just go in way too dark, and then it can be really hard to lighten up the fur afterwards. So what I do is I just keep gradually building up on the layers, but I really am just applying very thin layers of pencil each time I add more value. So for darker fur, I definitely be adding in a lot more pencils and a lot more colours down too, but I'm just keeping the colours limited and the shading light. So I literally just built up the colours from light to dark. So I started with the cool grey one and then the warm grey one, and then I went up to the cold and warm grey 2 and then the silver. Now what I am doing is I'm really going to start to refine those highlights and the brightest section of fur, and I am using 2 methods for this. So the first method is by using the Tombo mono eraser. So I'm using the eraser to just gently lift up some of the pencil pigment from the paper, and I'm also going to be using the white pencil to add in even lighter tones in the fur. This is going to give that white fur a lift and just bring it to life. So using a very firm pressure on the paper just means that I will really work that pencil into the paper and just burnish all of that paper grain. I am using the tip of the pencil, and I'm just using a very sharp pencil as well. So this means that I can just really focus that pressure onto the paper and also just create those really fine lines and those highlights. To tone down any areas that are too bright, I once again just go back in with those coloured pencils and I shade in some values just to tone down any harsh lines, or just to create those faint fur lines with the pencil strokes. I do also use a couple of darker pencils at this stage just to really lift up any shadows and dark values in the fur as well. So I just use the silver just to create that darker and more concentrated fur line to hype up that contrast and the value in the fur. I'm also using the cold greys to add a bit more of a bluish, cooler and duller feel to the fur, and just to tone down any areas that are looking a bit brown or just muddied. I'm also thickening out some of the fur, so where the fur clumps are to add a bit more fur growth and to create some fuller fur, I'm just creating thicker shading and just intensifying some of those shadows by keeping the pencil strokes closer together and then shading in more value into the surrounding areas as well. I definitely do think that it is a lot easier to draw white fur when you are drawing on a toned or coloured paper, because you can actually start off with your white pencils and then just shade in some darker values and shadows. But these are the top tips that I have when it comes to drawing white fur on white paper. I am definitely considering doing a tutorial on how to draw white fur on toned paper. I absolutely love drawing white animals on toned paper because the white fur just really stands out against the paper. So if that is something you would like to see, please do let me know in the comment section down below. And I would also like to know if white fur is something that you struggle with. So I will let you know on a little secret, white fur is actually my least favourite coloured fur to draw because I just struggle so much with all the light values. But I would really like to know what your least favourite coloured fur is to draw, so don't forget to leave a comment below. But anyway guys, that just about finishes off this tutorial for today, and I really do hope you enjoyed this tutorial and picked up loads of great tips on how to draw white fur. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell if you are new around here, and I will be back in my next video. Bye guys!